our national security mission as a whole, we work very closely with all of our interagency partners and with our partners both internally to Commerce and externally with our interagency partners to make sure that our seniors have the necessary information they need to make the necessary policy decisions they have to ensure that our law enforcement agents have the information they need to take the necessary actions in support of investigations. The team owns this mission. They feel very strongly about the mission, and they're very motivated as a result of it. I think one of the other ways I think that it really means a lot to our analysts is that they get to see the direct impact of the work they do. When you talk about entities being added to the entity list or support to other kind of policy actions being taken in situations like the Russia-Ukraine situation right now, I mean, we get to see direct impact of our work in the real world. So I think that's why our work is important and we take it so seriously.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment you made about your team owning the mission. I think that's vital in any of our roles that we have within our careers. You know, when you have that ownership of what it is that you're doing, you tend to have a better mission, better outcome. Thank you. And Yaswe.
Thank you, Laura. My connection is going in and out, so I didn't catch everything that Heather and Dennis said. But I think I would like to chime in that, you know, as a commercial officer, my work is important because what I'm doing is promoting fair trade around the world. And through trade, I'm promoting economic prosperity. And I think that's important to everyone in every country around the world. But equally, if not more important, is that as a mother of a young girl, my work allows me to demonstrate to my daughter and to the young people around me that I'm doing something to better our society. And as I always tell my daughter and any young person who's willing to listen, that we all have a responsibility to, you know, contribute to leaving this world a better place. And I think my work gives me the platform to do that.
Thank you, Yaswe. It's important to show our daughters and our youth the importance of what we do and set those examples. Thank you. Now, Heather, I said earlier I have a follow-up question for you. So it is my understanding that you manage Commerce's field operations in Eurasia, a part of the world that has seen a lot of turbulence over the past few years. And since Russia's re-invasion of Ukraine on February 24th is a site of war, how do you cope with the stress and how do you stay resilient?
Thanks for the question, Laura. I've been working in the region in different roles for the last 7-8 years, first for 5 years in Russia, and now in charge of Commerce's field operations across Eurasia. And for Commerce, the Eurasia region includes Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, Kazakhstan, and then 4 partner posts where we coordinate the commercial work of State Department colleagues, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. I arrived in Russia in 2014, just a few months after the Kremlin first invaded Ukraine. And in addition to various waves of sanctions and counter-sanctions that made our work difficult, from 2017 onwards, we were also hit with a number of Kremlin efforts to close our offices and limit our work. They cut our numbers and closed offices until we went down from nearly 30 employees in 2 locations to just 7 in Moscow, and ultimately last July to none. And those were very difficult years, but the last few months have been even harder. We had unrest in January in Kazakhstan that meant the evacuation of some of our employees in our consulate there. And then on February 24, Russia further invaded Ukraine, as you mentioned. We had 12 Commerce employees in Ukraine. I'm very happy to report that thanks to the incredible support we got from leadership, we were able to get them all to safety. About half left just before the invasion, the other half left after the invasion. I honestly don't think I slept more than 2 or 3 hours at a time while we were working to get them out. Just to tell you a couple of the stories, we had one employee for whom we had gotten a spot on a train out. but she was trapped in a bomb shelter with a family member. There was shelling. She was afraid to walk to the train station. She made it safely and in time for the train, but it was really dangerous situation. We had another employee 8 months pregnant with her first child. She had to make the really difficult decision to say goodbye to her husband and walk alone across the border several kilometers to safety. Men aged 18 to 60 can't leave Ukraine right now, and she doesn't know when her husband will see their child. How have I coped with this stress? I guess mostly by focusing on the positives. I've never been so proud to work for the Department of Commerce as I have been these past weeks. Worked for Commerce for 16 years. And always been proud, but especially these past weeks, our leadership was uniquely supportive in the interagency and really made it clear at every stage how much they cared about the safety of the team. Commerce employees went out of their way to give generously, to meet people at the airport, to host Ukrainian families in their homes, and also, of course, the most positive aspect of this situation, the incredible courage that the Ukrainian people have shown, including our Ukrainian employees. I don't know if you can imagine leaving your friends and family, leaving everything you own with your kids, but maybe having to leave your spouse or partner behind, going to a foreign country and somehow still logging into work and still doing a good job. I'm not sure I could do it. They're so brave. So thank you for that question, Laura.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing, Heather, your frontline experience and the stories that have come out. Just before I move on to the next question, if anybody would like to add any comments or anything, just, please feel free to interrupt me. I think we might have lost some connection here. So for Dennis, I would like to ask you a question that I hope you're comfortable with answering. What makes up your support system, and in what ways do they help sustain you? And now, of course, we're talking about the last couple of years and everything that has happened with COVID, but just in general, and having to deal with that situation.
Thank you very much for the question. So for my support system, I can say mostly I rely heavily on the team that I work with, and I rely heavily on my friends and family. The first year of COVID was pretty difficult. I had to make decisions in terms of how, since I was coming into work every day, and everyone was a little more conservative in the beginning, especially because we didn't know how we would impact other people as we saw them in person and such. So the first few months, it was pretty lonely here in the building, but we always made sure that we tried to stay in touch as a team, virtually, in terms of my work team, virtually via Teams calls. We even did virtual happy hours on occasion just to get everyone, in a place where at least people were still communicating with each other. In terms of my family, I would, because of my parents' health issues and stuff, I would go visit them once a week. In person outside, just so that I wouldn't do anything to them basically. But having those two avenues, and then my friends, we actually developed a weekly chat meeting also, and we continued to have them well into the second year of COVID. These individual groups have made a huge impact on my ability to be able to come into work and do my job. But I want to do an additional shout out to these people because I guess the second year of COVID, I ended up having to face some additional health issues. So I needed to have additional support than I think I would have maybe not otherwise needed. And my team stepped up immediately. They immediately showed that they could cover for me when I wasn't there, come into the office more, even if, even while everyone else was, still working from home and everything. My team stepped up and started to come into the office regularly to make sure that we provided coverage for the department and the bureau. So yeah, but that's it really. My friends, my family, my team, all of them have been a huge support during this time. And I don't think I would have been able to do any of the work that I was able to do without them and their support.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate hearing the support that you had. A lot of the times when we're in the workforce, in the workplace, we're provided the training to do our jobs, but when we're thrown into a situation like we were to just one day you're in the office, the next day everything changes. Those support systems are critical for our mental health, for our job. So I'm thankful that you had a good support system, and I hope that it continues as we evolve into whatever the new normal may be for us. Thank you. Thank you. And this question is for any of the panelists that would like to answer. How has your work evolved in the last 2 years? And also, what have you done, or what did you have to do to prepare for a lot of those changes?
I can be the first one up for this one.
Okay.
Sure. So I run an intelligence shop, and the idea of running an intelligence shop virtually sounds impossible. And we have to very quickly come up with ideas of how we as a team could continue to provide the broader intelligence and analytical support that we needed to get our mission completed in this environment where we were at max telework, especially in the first year. So we've always been reliant on open source research and information, but we changed our procedures in terms of how we write our reports and everything, so that everyone on our team, even those who weren't clear, could now start working on, conducting open source research, getting everything done up to that point, and then having them reviewed over virtually at home or in the office, and then actually having them moved up to the classified systems where whoever was in the office could further complete the report by enriching the information with additional sources. We have basically made this a permanent part of our SOPs, and moving forward, this is how, it actually made us much more efficient. It made us become better researchers on the open source, and my senior analyst played a huge role in developing methodologies to conduct really good open source research, a methodology that our interagency partners have asked to learn and wanted to learn from us, because you can find a lot of good information out there on the internet that you can't sometimes even find in classified sources. So it's been a huge shift in our office, in that prior to COVID, we would never have really authorized any kind of telework at all. And now moving forward, we envision people teleworking at least twice a week and still be very productive in that role. So it was a huge shift for our office, but a very efficient and good shift. That's and also, I guess the other thing we did was start the use of these virtual tools like MS Teams, and has been essential in order to keep having that momentum, having team meetings, having discussions, to get to have everyone on the same page to get our work completed. So that's how we move forward with COVID.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate hearing how you said some of the practices that you learned have now been incorporated into permanent procedures. And I think although we've had some tough times, we can all relate. I think a lot of the beauty that came out within our workforce is new ideas, innovative ideas. The concept of that's how we've always done things was challenged, and we had to find a way to do things differently. And in some cases, I've gotten a lot of feedback that a lot of what the processes that have come out have been so much better because we were having the opportunity to think outside the box. Now, I believe, Yasue, I believe you were going to respond as well.
Yes, thank you. I would say, like everyone else, my routine has been twisted around over the past couple of years. And with schools closing intermittently, we've all had to rebalance our personal and professional lives like never before. And it's, really nothing you can prepare for. So for me, it's really been about adapting, being just open to adapting to new situations. And letting go of preconceived notions, letting go of, the way I'm used to doing things. For many commercial officers, we transitioned to different new posts during the pandemic. which meant that, we arrive in a new post and we quarantine, and then we really don't meet our colleagues that we're working with on a day-to-day basis, face to face. So, I'm definitely an in-person person. I like to meet face to face. And, when I came here, I couldn't meet my team. Initially, it was discomforting, but, you adapt, right? And it was about just instead of meeting face to face to build a trust, just learning how to build trust virtually. And again, letting go of preconceived notions and just throwing yourself out there and just trusting. And it's worked. What other choice do you have, right? But it has worked out very well. Just, believing in the best, trusting in the people that you work with.
Thank you, Yasue. Key word that you used there, adaptability. I think that truly defines all of Department of Commerce and all employees outside. We had to adapt. We had to do our jobs differently, as I'm sure you did, going through changes, going through our people leaving the agency, some of our colleagues, and having new colleagues come in and trying to establish that trust and those relationships that we're not able to establish. Those are difficult tasks. Those are difficult. But I think in talking to you all and some of other leaderships and employees that I've talked to, it's pushed us to do that. It's brought something out in all of us to be able to adapt, I think. So thank you for that. Yasue, I just wanted to ask you one question here. What are some tools or techniques that you yourself have relied on to help others during the crisis situations?
I think in the past couple of years when we've all been so isolated, I've tried to lend an ear to a colleague, friends who wanted to talk about their day, about a particular issue they're having, because I know that that's what I would want. If I'm in a crisis, I just need to download onto someone. They don't need to provide me with a solution, but I just want to talk about it and know that somebody else is there to listen. And I think especially for adults who are the only adult in their household, like my situation, I'm surrounded by, when I come home, it's my daughter, a young child. So it's not like we can discuss the issues, the challenges that I'm facing during the day. So it's good to know that I can be there for someone in a similar situation, and also at the same time know that others are there for me, because sometimes I just need to download.
Thank you. It's important to have that in. I can relate to you with having a daughter and being the only parent in the home where, not only was I thrown into a new environment, but so was she in terms of, now receiving online education and, teenagers, they're friendly little people. And not being able to have that connection, ensuring that her mental health was okay, that, that she had tools to cope with what was happening. So I think in my situation, we kind of helped each other throughout this process. I wanted to ask you this question, and this is for all panelists, and we'll go ahead and start with Heather. How do you stay motivated and hopeful or positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what's motivating is and in fact, during the pandemic, I have to admit that I had days when I had difficulty. We have 3 kids, 2 in college, but they came back from college. Everybody was at home, and then a younger child who was doing online school. And I'm in a region where there isn't great internet. Our local employees were in lockdown orders at home. They didn't have a laptop. And so we had to come up with ways to make it work. And I think for me, staying motivated is focusing, means focusing on what I can control. So I couldn't wave a magic wand and get laptops out from the United States. In fact, I think it took 10 or 11 months for us to get them laptops. But what I could do is work with them on strategies to borrow a laptop. We tried in some markets where we could rent a laptop. We used their cell phones. We upped the data plan so they could use the cell phone as a hotspot for people who didn't have normal internet at home. And I think, it made us feel empowered when we could overcome stuff. I learned that in Russia, we had a kind of an office saying, which was hashtag against all odds. And whenever something super challenging would happen and we would somehow overcome it, we would say that to each other. We'd be like, yeah, against all odds. So I think, for me anyway, that's what works to keep myself motivated.
Thank you. Thank you. Against all odds. I love it. Thank you. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit. I've read your bios. We talked a little bit about your positions and what you do. But one important question that women often get asked is, have you had any special mentors during your career that have either, again, encouraged you, inspired you, helped you along the way that you would like to talk about?
I know I just talked, but I
Okay.
definitely, this is one that's very close to my heart. So if it's okay. And I am not one of these women that gets talked over in meetings. You've probably noticed I'm the one who does talk over other people. So that's my weakness. So
like Linda said earlier, share your story, use your voice.
So, well, thank you for putting up with me. But yeah, I should just say at the outset, I have had some really helpful and wise male supervisors who were also excellent mentors to me, and I'm really grateful for their support and advice. But since we're doing this event during Women's History Month, I'd like to maybe share about 2 female mentors I've had. One is Pamela Ward. Pamela is the Regional Senior Commercial Officer based in Bucharest, Romania. She was my first supervisor in the commercial service 16 years ago when I did my first tour in Johannesburg, South Africa. And she taught me so much, not just in terms of how the commercial service works and how to do my job, but also how to be a compassionate leader who really cares about the team. The other mentor is Cindy Biggs. She's currently the Senior Commercial Officer in Warsaw. Cindy and I met when we were both back in Washington working on an initiative, and then we were both in language training again together 2 years ago. And I took over from Cindy as the advisor to the Women Commercial Officers Affinity Group. And Cindy is just the most unfailingly positive and encouraging person I know. From the beginning of my career, I always found her to be so supportive. And not everyone is religious, and that's okay. But I do feel myself that I can sometimes see a divine plan in how things play out. When our Ukrainian employees and their families were trying to get to safety, to get out of Ukraine, the 2 countries whose borders they could most easily cross were Romania and Poland. And those were the 2 countries where Pamela and Cindy were posted. And I was terrified for our employees, as I shared, but I knew that as soon as they crossed the border, they would be safe and they would be taken care of because I knew who was there, these 2 amazing women leaders. And there's not time for me to tell you everything that they did, but just to give you a sense of what kind of people we're talking about. Cindy showed up at 3 a.m. to meet a family, a mother, a sister, and a child, one of whom was our employee, at a train station, brought them back to her house. Had presents for the child. I think the comment from the child was, is this my birthday? So she went from a terrifying situation to feeling just so welcomed. Pamela, I think at one stage had 6 Ukrainians staying at her house. And our employee who came across the border 8 months pregnant, she now has an obstetrician. She has a place to deliver her baby. And I wrote and said, Pamela, do you need any help getting stuff for the baby? And she sent me a list of all the stuff. She had organized a group who had bought a bed, strollers, clothes, the work. So just really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing those stories, because I think sometimes we hear about certain things that are going on, but we don't know the help that is out there and how this experience is affecting many of our colleagues, many of our friends and family. So I appreciate you sharing. Thank you. Thank you. How do you, what advice would you give for women who don't have mentors, you know, who just haven't made that connection with someone, you know, because a mentor doesn't have to be, you know, necessarily a supervisor or even within, you know, your department. What advice would you give for women or anybody who is seeking that mentorship and how to nurture that relationship? And of course, the question's for anybody. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dennis Wislu. So over the last several years, we've had the lucky chance of hiring several president management fellows, and as part of their program, we are actually required to identify mentors for our analysts. And one of the first things we asked the analysts to help them identify mentors for them is to ask about what their interests are, really, to see what their interests are, what they see themselves doing in 5 years, so that we can identify specific people who can mentor them. I remember one of my first PMFs 2 years ago was really interested in doing foreign service work or foreign commercial service work. So Linda Minsker was gracious enough to mentor her. And we tried to identify, I mean, because of COVID, we were unable to do the travel stuff for her like we wanted to, but I think that's like a key thing that folks need to think about in terms of, first think about what you are looking to improve or get ahead on, and then look for people who've done it and been there and kind of talk to them about how they did it to get there, what they did to get to those positions.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate all the advice. You know, it's a mentorship, I think, is something that is talked about, but the process of finding a mentor, I think sometimes a lot of people would be interested in finding out those sources. Now, I do have another question, and I know we've talked about this a little bit throughout, you know, our conversation here, but in the spirit of our theme and how we talk about hope, what advice would you give new women that are starting with the Department of Commerce to advance their careers, to keep the hope in their fields, you know, to transition into what the new normal is, or in the direction that the Department of Commerce is heading? Yes, Sway?
I'll open my mic.
Thank you.
Before I address this question, I just want to go back to your question earlier about, you know, the mentors in our lives,
Mhm.
and Heather's response about Pamela Ward and Cindy Biggs. I have to say, you know, I didn't open my mic after that because I thought, well, she's absolutely right. I couldn't say it better. I worked closely with Pamela, and I worked tangentially, not so directly with Cindy, but, you know, as Heather spoke, I thought, of course, those are the people that I know, you know, absolutely on point. So, you know, we're very, very fortunate to have mentors like that in our organization. To your question, you know, if someone is starting today, a young woman starting today in our organization, I would say, get rid of any, you know, gender biases that you might have in your mind. And I think, you know, for the younger generation, they may not think so much. They may not actually be aware of gender biases as, you know, older generations. But I think it's to their advantage that they go into any situation just believing there is no gender barrier. No barrier at all. And of course, at the same time, seeking out those women and men in leadership. And the men, as Heather mentioned, you know, I think she and we probably had similar male mentors in our careers, and they've been wonderful because they've recognized that there have been disparities, there have been biases, and they particularly, you know, sought out mentorship opportunities with us.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you. I think it's important that you mentioned males, the mentorship, and also to discuss how, of course, it's Women's History Month and we are focused on women, but when we are in our careers or we're seeking mentors or advice, it's important to look at our male allies and to look at, they can learn from us and we can learn from them because, you talked about gender biases. A lot of the times you just don't know what a person may think or feel, and having those conversations, having the interactions, seeking those mentorship opportunities, I think is great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Heather?
Thanks. My advice would be don't be afraid to take risks. Don't wait till you're 150% qualified for something to apply. Apply for stuff that you won't get. Be audaciously ambitious. I often see, and this is a generalization, but I have noticed working with other women that they seem to want to wait until they absolutely know everything about this new leadership role that they're going to apply for. And what I have learned actually from some of my male mentors is, no, that's the deal. Maybe you're only 80% of the way there, but you'll get in that leadership role and you'll learn and you'll grow. And there's nothing wrong with being ambitious. Second piece of advice I would say is to just seek out mentors and cheerleaders. You cannot do this alone. My biggest cheerleaders are my dad and my husband and my 3 kids. I think everybody needs a support network, whether it's made up of friends, relatives, or whoever. We all need help. My mom died young, so my dad is an especially important part of my life. He often came for several weeks at a time to help when my kids were small. My kids, who are bigger now, were the main technical advisors to me when the pandemic hit and we had to pivot overnight to virtual events. And also, we have to host a lot of events at our house when we serve overseas. And right now, actually, my husband is preparing for guests who are arriving right after this event is over.
Wow, so you have a busy evening ahead of you. It's interesting. I love the advice that you gave about applying for the jobs. I read an article here recently that talked about the disparities with women and males and applying for those jobs. And it specifically talked about women waiting until, we go through and we read everything, every line, and go through and say, well, I don't have that, and get discouraged very easily. Where males, for the most part, they're like, I can do that. Yep, check. So that's great advice. Thank you. Because I think a lot of the times we tend to hold ourselves back because we're not in our minds. We don't believe we're that perfect fit. But take your chances. Go out there. You just never know. Thank you. Now, I would like to, right now it is 12:45. Or that's the time that I show here. I did leave some time here for questions, just in case we have any questions from the audience, or if anybody would like to make comments or type in any questions in the chat. My supervisor here, Director of Policy and Evaluation, Ms. Stacy Carter, has been diligently monitoring the chat for us today. So if Stacy, if you have any questions or any questions have been emailed to you directly, can we go ahead and open up the time for those?
Yes, we can. And there's nothing in the chat right now. And I've been so engrossed in the discussion that I better check again because it's been wonderful. But we don't have any. Oh, wait a minute. Something just came in. This question, I'm assuming, is for whomever would like to respond. And the question is, what advice would you give to a young woman just starting their career in the government? And this may have been touched on to some extent. I don't know that we heard if Dennis has comments on that, or anyone actually. And it may have been covered, but if there's anything to add to that, what advice would you give a young woman just starting their career in the government? Thank you for your question, Renee Watt. Oh, you're on mute.
I am going to reiterate something Heather said because I really liked it. Being audaciously ambitious. I really like that term. I think that a lot of people, I think it's going to be kind of a repeat of what everyone else said, but I do think that people do kind of wait around to I don't want to say people, I say generally women do really wait to get those specific qualifications, like you said, when they're applying for jobs and such. And whereas, male colleagues might be more confident in whatever capabilities and everything they have. I think that as a young person coming into the government, I think you got to keep yourself open to learning from your colleagues and your leaders. I think you should be open to reaching out to your colleagues, not just within your department, but other places too, to get an idea of what other opportunities are out there, and not necessarily just pigeonhole yourself into the place that you're in. Look for opportunities to, learning opportunities, whether it's within the NGO community or within the government, in terms of not just training, but in terms of like these brown bags or these discussions where you can get other kinds of ideas from people with varied experiences and backgrounds. And yeah, I mean, like, ask questions. Don't be afraid of asking questions, whether it's related to your specific job or anything else you're interested in. Young people should feel comfortable going to their seniors, their managers, other senior analysts, or other senior colleagues that they work with. They should be open to just being open to ask questions, to learn, and just get, soak in as much as they can, especially if they're new.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. I would just like to add to that. A lot of the times your agency has communities of interest, employee resource groups that are out there for you. You look for them, you join them. That's where you start to have your networking, your community common interest. That they vary from federally employed women to LGBTQ plus pride groups. That there's so much more to the agency and the programs that, when you first start your new job or you enter government, you may not know, but, reach out and find out what's available, because there's so much more to our careers than, what we were hired to do. So thank you.
The next question is from Linda Minsker.
Actually, I just had a response. Sorry to intervene on the recruitment of young persons interested in government. This is very near and dear to my heart, especially as a woman in federal law enforcement. It's been historically very difficult to recruit women into this career field, and I have always tried to explain, hey, maybe it wasn't even inside of your thinking pattern. I mean, I was an English major. I was an English major at a liberal arts college when this opportunity came up to join federal law enforcement. My mother had a heart attack when she first saw me in my gear coming out of the field office. But, it's so important to stretch your imagination. And I just wanted to put in a plug. There are organizations like Women in Federal Law Enforcement who host recruitment campaigns specially designed for recent graduates. One of the ones that really piqued my interest was hosted by the CIA and intelligence communities. And the way they described it is, okay, maybe it's not just, the super spies in the field, but they need artists, they need engineers, they need all sorts of positions to come into this field and contribute. So you just never know. I mean, back when I graduated college, I think my senior advisor recommended that I open up the yellow pages because there was no really robust internet recruitment. But the point is, there are so many positions out there that you may have never even considered. So put your feelers out there and you never know what you'll find. Over.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for that insight. The next question is how to focus on career, daily work during times of turmoil like pandemic when loved ones die or suffered from COVID. So it's really how do you focus on your daily work requirements during just tumultuous times is the question for anyone to answer.
Yeah, and I'm if you don't mind, I'll have a go. I'm sorry if it sounds like the person who posed the question may have lost someone or had someone ill during the pandemic, and I'm sorry to hear that. I also had a close family member who was quite ill with COVID, came through, but with some serious complications. Yeah, it's hard. You know, while I had to do a year of Turkish language training, and during that time, my 38-year-old cousin went missing. She was walking to a doctor's appointment at noon. The dog team traced her scent to halfway point, so there was a car pickup, and it was recently ruled a homicide. Although we don't have her body yet, we don't have a conviction, but it was determined to be an abduction and a homicide. That was incredibly tough. And then I had to apply myself and, you know, learn Turkish grammar and Turkish verbs and still pass a test. And how do you remain focused on that? I think, you know, a lot of it is just being kind to yourself and saying, this is awful, you know, acknowledging this is a terrible thing. And it's tough right now. And my brain isn't quite there. You know, sometimes the phone, it goes down yellow and it's like 20%. It's like, you know, low power mode. Well, that's how I felt. I felt like my brain was on low power mode. But I think a lot of it was just like, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do the class, and I may not be as brilliant as I'd like to be, but I'll get through it. So I think that, for me at least, that's how I have managed.
Thank you for that, Heather, for that input. Yasway, it looks like you were going to respond as well.
Yes, and it almost seems counterintuitive, you know, when there's so much turmoil around you or in your own life, that, you know, I tend to, especially during those times, take a little bit of time to do something selfish, take the time to reflect, take some time to do something that's going to energize me, you know, whether it's to go for a swim, to lock myself up in a room and play music, or, you know, whatever it is that energizes you. I think, you know, when you're surrounded by turmoil and crises, it's important to remember, you know, you have to energize yourself first before you can help anyone else.
Absolutely. Thank you both for sharing your personal stories. The next question that has come in is, first of all, an acknowledgement. Thank you all so much for this discussion. This question is particularly for Heather. Heather, thank you for your insight, or comment rather. Heather, thank you for your insight on being ambitious. And the question is, what are the best platforms or places to find a mentor? So we can start with Heather, and then if the other panelists have input, I'm sure that would be welcomed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in a unique setting here overseas in an embassy. So, you know, the others might have, you know, better advice. I guess what has worked for me is just, you know, people that I admire, that I notice are doing a good job. I'd like to, you know, be more like them. I ask them for advice. And I have found people are remarkably kind and generous with their time and their advice. So I don't know, again, the others might have a better, so, you know, some better thoughts on this.
Dennis, looks like you're.
It follows Heather's line. I mean, like, basically, like I said before, if you can figure out what specifically you are interested in, which way you want to go, whether it's your supervisor, whether it's seniors working with you, other colleagues, ask around to see who else is. Like, I will say, like, I had analysts that are super interested in doing data analytics. I put them in touch with somebody. My sister works in that environment. I put them in touch with people that she was working. I mean, like, I think it's really just figuring out what you want and then asking around to see if you can find people that are doing well in that environment, that are working on that particular kind of job or career that you are interested in. And I will also agree, I can't remember who said it right now. I think was it Heather, or I think people are always willing, not always, but mostly willing to talk to and meet with anyone, especially when you're talking about career aspirations and such. And if you're going to somebody and asking them for advice, I think people are very forthcoming in providing that advice. So again, identify what you are interested in and then start looking for people who are doing that and doing that well. and then ask around to see who, if you don't know those people, if you can talk to other people, they might know people they can refer you to.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Laura, I see about one more question. Do we have time for one more question or?
Actually, we only have 4 minutes, and I'd like to get through if your question was not answered, we do keep a detailed list of questions, so we can always send the questions to the panelists and send you a response via email.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you. Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Charles Clark, who is the Director of Office of Human Capital Strategy, and he will be providing closing remarks for us today. Thank you, Charles.
Oh, thank you, Laura. And thank you to all our panelists. This was phenomenal. For those of you don't know, I mean, Laura just said Charles Clark in OHRM, and I'm proud to have been invited to say a few words, a few remarks on the Women's History Month program. But I have to admit, when Laura first asked me about this, I kind of thought to myself, why me? Why me? But listening to the comments from the panel today and thinking about some of the things that I've had an opportunity to do over my 30 years of supporting and trying to be the best ally as I can to everyone, but I will say particularly in the space when it comes to gender, to women. I have helped establish federal employee women groups at the Census Bureau and here at the department. The national president for FEW actually came and gave me a little certificate of appreciation and shared that I'll be an honorary lifetime member. So that was good. I didn't have to pay any fees. So I really appreciate that. But one of the things that I've tried to do over the course of my time was to be able to take that and say, hey, you know what? I want to say this in the correct way. As a Black man, there were a lot of people that mentored and moved me that didn't always look like me. And what I did is I looked at ways to how to put that in motion in a different way as well. And when I talk with groups and talk with folks that are seeking mentors, seeking leadership, sometimes it's not about always looking for someone that has walked in the same footsteps, but finding folks that have walked in different footsteps that can give you a different perspective, that can give you a different look, and that can give you different information with regard to how to maneuver in those areas where you may not be familiar. So I have, over the course of my time, I was doing a little bit of research and thinking about, I would say that out of probably at least 100 folks that I've hired, over the last 30 years, that the large majority of them have been women. Now, I work in a predominantly woman career field. I'm an HR manager. And so that part isn't hard to kind of get it. I currently have 7 members on my media staff, 6 of them highly qualified, highly skilled women that I'm excited to work with and talk with all the time. I have this thing that when I sit down and try to talk about, what can I do? What can I be? I have told employees I do what's called an MM moment. And I actually have an employee put up the ball, a fist when they need an MM moment. And the MM means mentoring moment. I just need to sit down and talk right now. If they come to me, it's not they're going to hit me, but it's like, I need a moment with you. And we sit down and try to make that, as enlightening and engaging as possible. I do a little bit of the analytics around the things that we do at Commerce. I took a quick look at just the incredible depth and experience and knowledge that the panel members had and that we just have in this department, especially among our women, is unbelievable. Did you know that over half of our mission critical occupations in commerce are filled by women? I don't know if folks really would have picked up or realized that. Now, I say over half, but it's 50.6, which is still over half, especially when you look at where our workforce is pretty much made up, only 45% is made up of women. Taking risks, being ambitious. I mean, wow, if we're not sharing it all the time, and I think it was Dennis that said it perfectly, along with Laura, there's no doubt about it. And when you have a sit down and a conversation, I do some mentoring and coaching on the side and have a chance to work with everyone, but oftentimes it's the women that I'm reminding that, you have way more skills and experience than you're giving yourself credit for. And it's just a matter of you articulating and putting it out there and having that confidence and being ambitious. That word was huge. So I just want to say that, I am honored to have been here to be able to have an opportunity to share a few words. I want to thank the panel. And also want to thank the Office of Civil Rights. You know, there are other events coming up that everyone should be on the lookout for. I've had the great pleasure of working with Stacy and I thought about this, Stacy, the First Generations Academy, you know, working with a lot of young women and a lot of young professionals and just trying to give them that information about how to maneuver into the federal government. So be on the lookout for upcoming events such as the First Generation Professionals Employee Resource Group. It's going to be launched in April. And then the AAPI commemorative events is going to be in May. But if you have any other questions or information, please email OCR at ocr@doc.gov. That's ocr@doc.gov. I just want to thank everybody again. Outstanding job. And, you know, if you happen to see my name on something and you have a question, I'm always here. I'm one of those folks that I don't mind sharing. If you don't mind hearing, sometime I can go a little bit long, but I tell you, it still will be, I think it'll be fruitful. Thank you again, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. And thank you to our panelists today. I appreciate your time, your information, your personal stories, and for you to have made the time to share with us today. This concludes today's event. If I can just have the panelists hang out for a couple of seconds here. Thank you.